Valentine's Day, on Giving Hearts Day. And I'm going to tell you the most powerful love story I have ever seen. It's my stepmother who's taking care of my dad. I titled the presentation, "The One at the Finish Line," because people are always talking about love at the start of the race, but it can be a greater love at the end. Now, the start of the race is wonderful. You find someone you love dearly, and you may have the opportunity to start some new lives. But at the end, the job is to escort them to the pearly gates and say, "I've done the best that I can. He's all yours." My mother died in 1994, and my stepmother's husband passed away 4 years earlier. And then at the time that they announced their engagement, my father and stepmother had already worked together for 4 years, and they knew they liked each other. They worked at the retired senior volunteer program, and he had the Macintosh, so he was secretary treasurer, and wisely, she was president. But so they got married in 1995 and had a wonderful time during their 70s. Then my father developed Alzheimer's. Not a pretty thing. In many ways, we have been fortunate because he still can recognize all of us. And we go to see him, and he sleeps 90% of the time. But when he's awake, he can hold a coherent conversation, and we have a good visit. And he's at the Missouri Veterans Home, which is a wonderful place. I have a brother whose name is Larry, and he used to work for Time Warner. So he is not Larry the cable guy. But he works in the government and business side of things. So he has been in just about every hospital in the Kansas City area. And he was very pleased to find out that that's where our dad was going, because he said, "It's the best one." So we were glad that he got to go there. My dad likes the place. He was in the hospital for a week just before Thanksgiving, and his big concern was, will there be a place for me back in the Veterans Home? And of course there was. But he went back there, but he has never been alone. The place of the Veterans Home is halfway between his town and Kansas City. I have a brother and sister in Kansas City. They come to see him all the time. But the great love, my stepmother comes just about every day. It's 40 miles one way. And she gets up in the morning and goes to the Y and then goes over to the Veterans Home. And just like with us, he's asleep most of the time. But when he's awake, he has a coherent conversation, and he's glad that whoever is there is there. So, but still, it's 40 miles each way. And So she was planning on going to visit him every day, and her son said, "I'm taking you for a test drive," because she's 90 years old and was planning on driving 80 miles a day to go and see my father. They used to go to the Y every day, and for a while they would go and they would walk together, and then they would go, and the Y in their town has a large format poster of them walking on the walking track. He's got his arm around her shoulder, and she's got her arm around his waist. And if you look carefully, the thumb is hooked through the belt loop in the back so that she can steer him along. But eventually he didn't want to go for the walk anymore, so he just went into the lobby and had coffee while she went out and walked. And then finally he just didn't want to go to the Y anymore. At this point, it's your privilege. So at this point, he can't even stand. And he got into the nursing. Finally, we kept putting it off. Finally got into the nursing home. They tried to get him into the car to go to the Y. She couldn't get him into the car, and she couldn't get him out of the car. And we don't know the details of what happened because she won't talk about them. It's just too terrible. I just can't tell you about it. So her son came over and they got him out of the car. So he's at the point now where he can't walk. He has to be very careful when he eats because he may choke. But he's still coherent and can still hold a conversation with you and knows who you are, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. One of the best compliments I ever got in my life came from one of my grandfathers who got to the point where he didn't know who people were. We went and we visited him, and he looked at me and says, "You seem to be a fine Christian young man." Thank you, Grandpa. Even though you don't know who I am, you still have a good opinion of me. But so nowadays she gets up in the morning, she goes to the Y, and then she gets in the car and she drives 40 miles out to the Veterans Home. And then she comes and turns around and comes back home, makes an 80-mile trip every day to go see her husband. Thank you, Virginia. It's the greatest love story I've ever known. Thank you.